Now next, we'd like to invite our moderator, Ariel Kramer, founder of Klover Communications, for investing in women's health. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. I want to introduce Tricia Schumann, Chief Investment Officer of Health Innovation Capital, Caroline Peacock, Investment Analyst at Techstars LA Healthcare, Mr. Dean Crean, Managing Partner at Cardiff Advisory LLC.
Mic check for everyone. Maybe. Very good. David, is yours good?
I think so.
Okay, we're good.
Ooh,
we're good to go. Welcome, Caroline, up there. Nice to have you with us.
Hi, thanks for letting me join virtually.
Well, thank you everybody for coming today. We're really excited for this panel discussion on investing in women's health. So we're just going to kick off the conversation by addressing the latest SVB and World Economic Forum report that came out. As you probably know, many of you seen that addressing the women's health gap could potentially boost the global economy by at least $1 trillion annually by 2040. So we're really excited to talk about what's it going to take to get there today. Yeah. And as you've seen, maybe in the last 5 years, investment in women's health has grown 314%. There's still a lot of work to be done here, so we're really excited to talk about what that looks like. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today.
You're welcome.
So Tricia, I think we're going to start with you. What do you think is driving this interest?
Well, I'm no expert, but I will say there are probably a couple of factors. One of them is something that we felt was important. We're a pediatric-focused fund. We came out of the idea that there were still opportunities for VCs to have undeveloped markets in healthcare. So as many of you may know, technology innovation, general innovation in healthcare has been occurring now for 15 to 20 years, but that's really a short cycle. So when you think about the different market sectors that have taken off in healthcare, some of them are underdeveloped. And really, that's the perfect model for an early stage investor like a VC or an angel group that might be investing in one of your companies, because they are always looking for undeveloped market opportunity to optimize that opportunity for risk. The VCs, the angel investors, take a lot of risk, and so they need a lot of upside on their investment profile. If a market has matured, it has less upside potentially, and also may be oversaturated in terms of their peers. So if we look at this market segment, certainly the market segment that our fund is focused on, but also has some maternal care innovation focus as well. I think what you see is emerging market opportunity that is very aligned to an early stage investor.
Caroline, just curious up there at Techstars, what does your portfolio look like in terms of women's health?
Yeah, so we have a bit of a varied portfolio when it comes to women's health. With our Techstars Healthcare Accelerator in particular, we work extremely closely with payers and providers. And so we have sort of a range of women's health. I can't say the ones incoming in our newest class, but they'll be announced in a bit, but a general focus on maternal health, caregivers. We have focus on women's health as it comes to hormones and mental health. A lot of varying things that we're primarily focused on, but I think one area that we're especially interested in is maternal health, as it's such an area for opportunity, and a lot of that also comes with caretaking. And so not only do we invest in women's health from the medical standpoint, but also women's health from the mental standpoint and being a parent. And as we know that burden falls primarily on the women. So yeah, but portfolio wise, we look at a number of areas, like I said, but all early stage. So most of our companies are still in the pre-seed, seed stage. If they're device centric or software as a device, then we're primarily looking at companies and bringing companies in that are pre-FDA approval, but ideally have some good pilots, have some good clinical trials, and we then work to get them incorporated into health systems however we can.
Caroline. David, I know that you have worked with companies on the later side of their journey, and just want to learn more about where do you think there's significant investment opportunities in women's health, as a lot of them are early stage, have yet to get to the later stage, because of the funding opportunities. Would love to.
Yeah, thank you, Ariel. Great question. I do work with a number of companies, early stage, late stage, but in regards to your question, where am I seeing some of the greatest activity as well as demand? And I work more on the M&A side. I certainly do a lot of work with companies looking to identify capital in today's very challenging headwind market. MTech. Super hot area. Anytime you can look at digital platforms to address women's reproductive as well as non-reproductive needs, seeing a lot of activity in that space, whether it's determining women's sexual wellness, other health problems, especially on the non-reproductive side, where I do a lot of work. Whether that's neurodegeneration, cardiovascular disease, what have you, immunological disease. Just a lot of, spending any time in that space. It's interesting from a investor standpoint, if you talk about AI, this is kind of the buzz, right? It's a shiny nickel in the market. 1 out of every 4 investments goes into a company or a technology that is enabled by AI. Meet with a lot of entrepreneurs, CEOs, and they come and talk to me about how difficult it is to raise money. I said, can you somehow couple AI with it? I say that in all jest, but seriously, there's just a lot of interest in that area. Other areas, reproductive health and planning. I think you heard Tristan talk about that. Preventative healthcare, wellness, certainly another big area. And then the other area that I'm starting to spend a little bit more time on is mental health. Super huge area. Private equity as an investor loves that space. So that's primarily where I'm seeing a lot of the activity.
And why is that? Why do they love that space?
They love the space because those are generally healthcare services, not like a pharma biotech where there's FDA and a lot of risk involved. It's about services and can they create a predictable business model that's basically spitting out cash. So that's why it truly defines what a private equity as an investor and their professional buyers, why they love that space. And frankly, strategic companies that have backing by private equity love to consolidate that space. They tend to be very, very profitable, especially on the heels or even going through COVID. It's ginormous. The demand is just so huge.
Thank you, David. Tricia, I wanted to know, why do you think it's taken us so long to see this level of success and interest in women's health? Aside from the obvious.
The obvious. Maybe because it's a minority in general, right? I think it has a lot to do with some of the points that David made, but one other, and I think Carolyn touched on this, and that is, what does it look like in the rest of the ecosystem of healthcare? If we look at one of the most important elements, reimbursement, we don't see a lot of reimbursement for a lot of services and solutions for women. As that changes, and I think mental health is one of the market trends that we're seeing where reimbursement is opening up through payers, I think that will help. We talk about what will change, what will improve the landscape for women's health. I think it has a lot to do with that. A lot of the health equity initiatives that are emerging will help because there is a downstream effect. So when we look at what's happening in the IPO market and the private equity market, when you look at different investor classes, those have an effect on earlier stage investors. So earlier stage investors have to have an exit opportunity as well. And so they're looking at what does that look like when we approach private equity or an IPO opportunity. Is there space there? And so all of those elements have an effect here. I do think that for a long time, the focus was on that space in women's health around fertility and reproductive health. And we're seeing some of that open up. So it's just unfortunately, healthcare is one of those industries that moves very, very slowly. A lot of red tape, regulatory, a lot of big shareholders involved, stakeholders involved. And so we have to be patient. But I do think we are seeing it loosen up. And we're certainly bullish on the market.
Thank you, Tricia. David, you want to add?
Yeah, just onto that. I think there's been just unfortunately a historical bias in research on XY, not on XX, and that's unfortunate. And I think we're hopefully starting to see some changes there. I think education has to be a big component. Networking events just like this have to be a big component to get the message out there. It has to change. There's so many gender specific issues with a number of these cardiovascular disease to neurology or degeneration. There's just a number of areas to look at. Unfortunately, there's some funding disparities, which I think need to be addressed at the government and NGO level, all the way down into the private sector. I deal a lot with venture capital, and it's just appalling how much money is going into women-founded companies. It's unacceptable. It's hovering around 2 to 4%, really. If you look at a lot of the efforts being driven in a board of directors level, and I do a lot of work at a board of directors level, women are involved with a company, it's more productive. And so, and also looking just at women-founded companies, whether it's one founder on the company or several, they tend to be equal or as better than many just men-led companies. So it's, I think there needs to be a better job by funders, capital providers, venture in particular. We're seeing some increase with women-founded venture, which is good, but it's still grossly low. So I think that's also, and they tend to be affiliated with women's health initiatives, right? So I think those are the big things. And Tricia certainly talked about underrepresentation in the field, and just, some of these areas just weren't seen as sexy. They were seen as niche. I think that whole mentality, that whole frame shift has to happen.
Thank you. A lot of the questions that I hear women entrepreneurs or anybody first-time entrepreneurs make, and a lot of these people happen to be women in the startup space, is there a point in going into an accelerator? What are the pros and cons? So Caroline, we'd love to ask you, at what point should a startup consider an accelerator, and how can they get the most out of that experience?
I love that question. I will give you my sales pitch on this, but I think absolutely early stage founders should consider accelerators. And I think as much as they can apply to industry specific accelerators, the better. For example, ours, we work with Cedars-Sinai, UC Irvine Health, Point32 Health, United Healthcare. So 2 behemoth providers, 2 behemoth payers, and having those industry connections and having stakeholders who are willing to invest in you and work with you and provide not only mentorship, but potentially pilot opportunities and sites for clinical trials is absolutely essential at this point in the stage of a startup's life. And I think even beyond that, generally accelerators are amazing because being a founder is a very unique, specific, difficult experience. And there's no right way to do it. And there's no one path that any founder takes. And so having an accelerator that can truly guide you through what it is to be an early stage founder and to guide you through the business development and the mentorship and the fundraising and the many aspects that impact the success of an early stage company is absolutely essential. And I think it is well worth the dilution that most companies have to take when they go through an accelerator to get these benefits and get the assistance, and also largely to get the camaraderie and the support of the other companies in the accelerator program. So for our healthcare accelerator, it's 12 entirely healthcare focused companies. And obviously building a class 2 device is radically different than building an e-com solution. And so having an accelerator that's very focused where you can work with other companies and really get the support and get the help from them as well is hugely important. And so I think there's also no one stage necessarily that it makes sense. I would say, ideally you have some good early traction, because in that way, accelerators can step in and immediately build upon the traction that you already have and truly help you accelerate your growth and help you scale. And when you already have a product And it doesn't necessarily have to be commercialized. Obviously, with devices and software devices, you have to go through an entire regulatory process that's lengthy and costly. But ideally, you have early pilots, early clinical trials, anything to build upon and prove that there is stakeholder buy-in in some way. But that said, like while we do work a lot with early stage, we see companies coming from other countries who are looking to expand into the US, and going through an accelerator is the perfect way to do it. Making those connections is so exceedingly difficult. And so going through something where you have access to industry experts and mentors in this space can expedite the process of US expansion by years, truly. So there's not necessarily a one size fits all for who should go through an accelerator and when, but really if what you're looking for is mentorship, business development, and help fundraising, and honestly a major network, an accelerator is always going to be a good bet.
Thank you, Caroline. As we move into common pitfalls that entrepreneurs encounter, especially in this space as they're seeking initial funding, I just want to turn this back to you, Caroline. So I want to learn about the differences between a positive versus a negative experience in an accelerator. And if you are to have a negative experience, why is that? We work with a lot of entrepreneurs that we feel are not maybe prepared enough, or they don't allocate the right time and resources. So I just want to hear from you what that looks like.
Yeah, I think largely the positive versus the negative experience, it truly comes down to the founders going through the program. You can basically have everything handed to you on a silver platter, but if you're not going to take advantage of the program and you're not going to have the camaraderie with your cohort, you're not going to work with the internal team, and you're not going to make the most of the connections and the weekly mentor meetings that you're given, then ultimately you probably will have a bit of a negative experience, and it probably won't be worth the dilution. So I think a lot of going through an accelerator is that you have to be the type of founder to want to go through an accelerator. And so it is a bit self-selecting in that way. But I think also it's, it really does come down to who you are and how much you're willing to make out of it. When you have an optional workout or workshop, are you going to do the optional workshop? Are you going to take advantage of everything and really take advantage of the network? Because with most accelerators, you not only have the network of mentors that you work directly with and your internal team, you also have access to so many other portfolio companies that you can contact, pick their brain, see how they've done it. And for an accelerator like Techstars, our portfolio is so massive that there is almost guaranteed to be another portfolio company that has gone through similar trials as you, that has gone through a similar experience that you can learn from and work with. And so I think really, truly, it's the founders that make the difference between a negative and a positive experience. And I think that's just sort of life. Everything is what you make it. And so if you're not willing to take advantage, then you're probably not going to get the most out of it.
Agreed. I think we're all nodding our heads over here. You can't really see us, but maybe you see us. Thanks,
I
Caroline.
can see it. Small movements.
Small people. All right, thank you. Tricia, would you like to add, what are some common pitfalls that you see first-time entrepreneurs making?
Excellent question. I do think Caroline points out some of the important aspects of launching a company and working in an early stage environment. It is to surround yourself with an ecosystem that's supportive as you enter or as you develop healthcare relationships. It is a very time-consuming and difficult process to launch a company in healthcare. And so understanding the broad framework of that, I think, is difficult for a few people on a founding team. Having advisors, I think if you're not able to participate in an incubator or accelerator, you could certainly look at their frameworks and model them for your company. Finding investors that add strategic value. I know this is really difficult because sometimes it's just hard to find any money. Finding a strategic is very difficult. But I do think the market is coming back a little bit. I don't want to jinx anything.
Knock on wood here.
But having been at JP Morgan, I know David was too, you can comment, but it was very active last year. So that usually is an indicator. Investment bankers are there talking about that IPO market that's so important to the rest of us. So I will say that if you're able to identify investors that seem to have folks that come from industry or come from your field, your sector of healthcare, could be potential advisors or people that could create introductions for you and a network for you. That's incredibly important. That is the tremendous value that these incubators, accelerators offer, but they can't support everyone. So if you aren't in a program like that, you can still develop something like that. It takes a lot of work, and it takes the right investor group around you. And I would say definitely do your homework on the investors. So interview investors as they interview you. They are going to be partners with you for a long time, and they will bring in potential partners like them, or partners will bring in each other. And so that could compound the effect, positive or negative, for you. Often they'll serve on your board, and you probably already have some of these experiences. So I make strong recommendations around asking the right questions and asking them early of the investors. One of the most important questions to ask today is about liquidity. So while a fund may demonstrate, or whether or not you can see that level of detail in your due diligence, important to understand how much cash an investor has to invest, either currently or sometime this year, and to understand what % of that is being held for their current portfolio. So if you're spending a lot of your time chasing investors that don't have liquidity or don't have cash that they are deploying, you could be wasting some precious time and sustainability for your company. So it could be an early question that you ask investors. Also, that alignment piece about in-market synergy and the ability to be an advisor or a facilitator for relationship building. And then what other companies, or VCs, seed investors, whatever type of investor profile you're looking for, have they worked with? Because those are most likely going to be the people that they would bring in or that would syndicate on your opportunity. So you want to get to know those folks as well, and be really comfortable about the investors that might be participating in your company.
Thank you, Tricia. David, do you have anything else that you'd like to add?
On the pitfalls?
On the pitfalls, but more so, what questions should entrepreneurs be asking to make sure they bring the right investors to the cap table?
How much time do we have?
I think we can be here all night.
And let's not do that. Pitfalls. The biggest thing that I see, especially when it comes to incubator and acceleration, one, it's not for everybody, but I always encourage people to take a look at it. It's got to come down to chemistry with you as the CEO, the entrepreneur, as well as your team. But I always encourage you to take a look at it. It's the power of collective intelligence. And that might be a little Pollyannish or a little metaphorical, but it's this power of peers, peer-to-peer advisory being together. Tricia had talked about, it's that you might know a CEO who went through the same issue that you're going through, or similar type of issue. It's super helpful, important. There's shared services. There's this network, this power of community that you really need to tap into. I don't think a lot of entrepreneurs, CEOs take advantage of that. Maybe they don't have the network. Well, you got to start developing it, or find advisors for your team can help you get there, so you can start networking like you mean it. Intentionality is super important. I try to work on that day in, day out. Some people think I'm a little overboard, but it's super important as you're trying to grow your business, whether it's a pharma, biotech company, or an M&A firm like I run. So it's super important. In terms of some of the areas that Tricia just talked about, gosh, like I said, I wasn't really kidding. You can spend a lot of time on this in this area, but bottom line is, when you start reaching out to investors, first of all, know who you're going out to, do your homework. Okay, and that's what Tricia was talking about. Just don't cold call people and I call it dialing for dollars. Yeah, I'm sort of giving my age away by saying that. But I see too many entrepreneurs, CEOs, and sometimes even board members don't really have great contacts, dialing for dollars, just dialing anybody up. I'm running a neurodegeneration company, and I'm reaching out to somebody who isn't even in that space. Why are you calling me? Right? Same thing. You might be a company dealing with pelvic floor disorders. Well, you're calling somebody who might be a late stage crossover investor, or someone who doesn't even, or hasn't even invested in the space of women's health. Are you wasting your time? So really do your homework on that. And then when you do start working, not only with investors, but also in mentors, advisors, start asking yourself asking the question Tricia just asked us, like, you really have to ask questions. It's a dialogue. It's not a monologue, right? We're going to ask you questions. Well, it's a two-way street. Have a conversation. Why should I invite you to my cap table? What expertise are you going to be bringing in? Are you planning to be with me for the long term? Are you going to be coming in on my subsequent round? Are you going to be coming in, pro rata on that? What expertise do you bring? Are you planning to mentor me? Because this might be the first time to the rodeo. So it's super important to ask those questions. You want to make sure that you're not just chasing dollars. Not all dollars are green. You got to make sure it's the right investor for you, company, and your cap table. Some might just want to come in and obliterate your cap table, right? Want to make sure and invite people in who are going to build you up and build around you, bring in other advisors, introduce you to other investors in subsequent rounds or even in the current syndicate. So it's super important. And then to me, it's asking those questions. Find out about what they invested in previously, right? What is their track record in this space? Just don't take the money for the sake of money. It's like I said, it can be very, very expensive. They generally like to take the majority share. They can easily just get you out of there. It's a simple board vote. So those are just some of my thoughts on top of Tricia's.
Thank you. Caroline, do you have anything that you would like to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys really hit on it. I think looking at the track record and saying, if you're a female health entrepreneur and you're talking to a VC, what sort of successes do you have? What experience do you have helping early stage women's health companies scale? What value are you going to add beyond just capital? I think these are all questions that you need to be asking. And I think, maybe pie in the sky, but even beyond that, are you a fierce advocate of this space? Are you actually genuinely passionate about it? Because everybody has more skin in the game when they actually care and they want you to do well. And then I think the other thing is sort of depending who your customer is and who you're selling into, my question would always be, what is your relationship with payers? What is your relationship with providers? If you're a direct-to-consumer healthcare company, how much experience do you have doing that? And what is your view on scaling those very specific companies? So I think you really just want to go in as eyes wide open as you can when you're looking to bring on investors. And I do think that in this fundraising environment, it's increasingly difficult to, and there's going to be an urge to just take the money where you can get it. But I think as much as you can really heads down, gain traction, gain customers, you will have negotiating power and you'll be able to bring investors onto your cap table that are going to benefit you in more than just monetary terms.
Thank you. Yes.
I just want to add to what Caroline's just said because this is really important. I think timing is really important to your company, and think about your equity with respect to the market economics. So right now our macroeconomic climate is that the investors have all the leverage because it's been very, very difficult to raise capital. So if you can buy time, and this could mean that you do a convertible note round or a safe round and just tread water for a bit, I think those valuation negotiations will improve. At least we're hoping they will. We're hoping that we hit bottom. But in the meantime, if you are in a race to grab as much money as possible and take it early in this market climate, you might look back and say, what if I tread water for 6 months or 8 months or a year, bought a little bit more time, I might have been able to negotiate a better valuation. So just keep that in mind because this market, like others, have cycles, and there might be a better time for you than others to raise certain kinds of capital. So I just recommend thinking about that aspect.
I give some corollary to that, and absolutely agree. I think it's great guidance in terms of trying to extend your runway. You don't really have to do it today, knowing that the pants are on the investor side right now. They're getting incredible deals because of depressed valuations, because of great terms. There's so much supply of capital out there, but the demand is outstripping the supply right now. My corollary to that is, and I agree, try to extend it, maybe doing the note, the bridge to something, right? Instead of doing a priced equity round where you're starting to look at institutional investors, you're going to take probably a significant haircut on dilution, right? What I wanted to say about the corollary, however, try to do what's best for the company by bringing in any money, sometimes at the expense, if you have to, of valuation, i.e. dilution. I take entrepreneurs through a math equation. They're all scientists. They've all taken math and calculus. So, what's 100% something, or 100% of the company, but you're not bringing any value in? Well, 100 times 0 is, or if I can give up something in order to get something, 50% of something is more than 100% of nothing. So you have to really think about that, do what's best. But the other aspect is make sure that you're inviting the right people in, right? You don't want to, like I said, obliterate your cap table and your company and your culture and your technology with people who aren't really passionate about it as much as you are. So.
Can we have a time check, by the way?
We have time for one question.
One question. Okay, I figured we were short on time.
No questions. Good.
No questions.
Can you, our online crew can hear your question.
But how does the M&A landscape look right now? I don't hear much about it. I hear a lot about venture, but kind of how does that interact? And I guess, how does it interact with accelerators and things like that?
M&A, I'm encouraged right now. The last 6 weeks of 2023, we saw a lot of great activity early in January, early this month, especially around JP Morgan going into it, part of the JP Morgan week, and then there was a week of kind of quietness, but it's still there. I'm encouraged with it. The reason I'm encouraged with that, as well as IPOs, a lot of companies are lining up for IPOs right now. There's a big queue, and then there's going to be some IPOs coming out, going to higher quality companies, but it's not going to be like a deluge of IPOs. The reason I like those are two liquidity events. What happens? LPs get their money back, right? From if it's let's say it's a VC who a general partner of VC had invested into a company. Well, they get return on investment, and then they give that off to the LPs, 80% generally, right? And LPs, wow, I made some money, I'm going to recirculate. So now there's money going back into the venture community to invest into either new funds or new companies. So we in the investment banking world and in Wall Street, we watch the M&A and the IPO market, as well as the secondary market, in terms of being a proxy, a gauge for what's going out, the sentiment. That's why I should mention about at JP Morgan, there's this slightly euphoric. It was weird because I haven't seen that in about 3 years, right? It was just weird. It was just like, all right, it's still, you have to be a little rational. It's still going to be challenging. I like to say survive to 25. So yes, you'll still see some activity on the M&A market, which is picking up, some IPO activity, which is great. It's not going to happen like, what's the difference between December 31st and January 1st? Yeah, 23 to 24, but not like it fundamentally changed. I think that was all just sort of pent up demand. But I'm watching, cautiously optimistic is what I wrote about. But I still think utilize your cash wisely, capital efficiency, and try to extend it out per Tricia's guidance. I think that's the biggest thing. But I'm encouraged, to answer your question, sorry if I'm long-winded, on the M&A side. Answer your question?
Right. Thank you to our investment panel, our moderator, Ariel Kramer, Tricia Schumann, Carolyn Peacock, and David Crean.
Thank you.